So let's take a look at our failed experiment to exclude grazers from the periphery of Lake Kuyucuk. The intent was here at this wetland of international importance to minimize the herbivory, minimize the grazing in some pockets, not the entire lake, but some pockets of the lake by fencing off experimental treatments. Essentially, it just didn't work. The villagers cut the fences even when we had paid guards. It was a whole long conservation management story, but suffice it to say it didn't work. So what we had to start with is what we have again. So if we're up here in the main uplands, if we look close, we're going to see very low cropped grass. So we have a very intense grazing by livestock here. It's mostly cattle, but it can be other things too, sheep and stuff. And so this is mostly about 3-4 centimeters high max, and more typically about 1 to 2 centimeters high grasses, a mixed grass composition, maybe a little bit of juncus, maybe a little bit of astragalus or some daisies herein. As we start to get closer to what was the historic edge of the lake, which was obviously a transitional thing, grassland to wetland to standing water, we start to get into areas like this fringing area, which was more dominated by broader leaf forbs and things. So, but about the same height, but definitely a different mix of thistles and the like. And then as we start to get to the main area where we more consistently were getting water, we would get Phragmites and other taller plants. So right now you can see we're starting to get into some just barely water at the surface. And so this should have been, this should have been like, I would have needed rubber boots to be here in past years. So right here in this immediate area, we're talking more like about 10 to 15 centimeters in terms of vegetation height. And mostly the same mix, but getting into taller vegetation, definitely significantly much higher biomass as we showed. And this would typically extend for about 10 to 15 meters until we got to more open water, deeper water, where it would be more than a meter, meter and a half deep, and then we stopped seeing significant vegetation. Now, essentially, we're seeing this transitional vegetation, this terrestrial wetland edge type of vegetation extend all the way throughout the entirety of the marsh. The difference is it's not obviously heavily grazed in the middle of the marsh, because of the lack of water, but that's what we're seeing here. In essentially the system is the same system that I started working on. We weren't able to transform the vegetation. The hope was to transform the vegetation, better vegetation, more abundant biomass, more topographic diversity in terms of the vegetation that's here, more birds or longer resident birds is on an important bird migratory flyway, and that would then in turn be good for biodiversity, and it would also be in turn good for the village and promote ecotourism, where the visitors would come in and pay the local villagers to either be a guide, to stay the night, to buy a lunch or something, and they would see a tangible financial benefit, particularly the village in general, but also several women-owned businesses, which is not the most supported thing here in Turkey. And unfortunately, nothing's going on. In fact, the reverse. So we are seeing lack of robustness in the system as we're seeing drier and drier years for a variety of reasons, but particularly climate change. So that mountain in the distance should be covered with snow still. It is almost bare. This is a snow-fed system, and so we have all kinds of challenges here. So if you'd have been here 20 years ago and then came today, the vegetation in the upland would look basically the same. The vegetation on the fringing area would look basically the same, but now we're seeing more invaded, the center point of the lake invaded by this more transitional habitat. So that's good, I suppose, in terms of biomass, but it's not good for migratory waterfowl that are one of the main users of this site. So there's very little standing water for them to land on, etc. So continuing challenges here in eastern Turkey and Lake Kuyucuk, and we're looking for solutions still.